So we're going to be talking on this finding the wow again. I will be doing most of it, and my mom-in-law Ingy has somehow managed to get out of doing the first part, but she'll share, I'm sure, some very insightful words of wisdom towards the end. But basically, so where this started or stemmed from was Koa, and basically how the past year, he's just over a year old, but has sort of taught me how to find the wow again, or our wow in life, and what that has to sort of do with happiness and joy and all these moments that we seem to miss. So while doing some research for this talk on, which started off as just being a talk on happiness and joy, I was looking at well, I didn't actually know, but it came out that there's actually an International Day of Happiness, which is the 20th of March, which also happens to be Koa's birthday. So I thought that was quite a cool coincidence, because originally it just started off as being a talk on happiness and how do we become more happy, but then my mom shared a gospel bite, which I'll get into later, and it became this thing that sort of linked for me back to Koa. And yeah, it's cool that it's actually his birthday is also the International Day of Happiness. So on that note, you can finish the sentence either in your head or on a piece of paper or in the chat or wherever, but I'll give you 30 seconds to think about. If you just say, now I would be happier if, and finish that sentence for yourself, I will give you 10 seconds to sort of think about it. It doesn't have to be too deep. It doesn't have to encapsulate everything, but yeah, something that you think would make you happier. And you don't have to share it, but as long as you think, oh, my dad's put a good one there, Jesus returned. Yeah. And I mean, I guess also that's a future happiness, but if you had to think about like there's something that happened right now, guess it could happen right now. But yeah, so keep that in your mind as we continue. So there's actually a course on happiness, and it's called The Science of Well-Being, and it's a very popular course. In fact, it's the most popular course in Yale's 300-year history of teaching. And she also has, the person who created this course is Dr. Laurie Santos, and she also has this course on Coursera with over 5 million students, so anyone can do it, with a 4.9 rating. And yeah, like I said, it's the most popular course in Yale's history. And she created this course because I think it was around the time, I think it was in 2018 or something, there was all these stats on how the world is so depressed, and you'd think we should be happy with all the things that we have, but we just are in one of the worst states of depression, suicide, all the things that come with it than ever before. And she felt like students really needed this course and they needed it now. And through her research, she comes up with this thing called the hedonic treadmill. And basically, if you envision a treadmill at the gym, the one thing a treadmill does is no matter how much you run, slow or fast, you will stay in the same spot. And she applies this hedonic treadmill to happiness, in that what we seem to do over and over again is we chase things in life. So whether it's chasing a promotion, a house, it could even be things like a relationship, but we're always chasing something in life. So that's us running on the treadmill, trying to get somewhere. And then through research, she found that we do get a lift when we get that thing that we wanted. So we genuinely do feel happier for a while. But the key is it's for a while. And what she then finds is within weeks or months, but most often just weeks, what we thought was this peak of happiness we've reached, we've got that promotion, we've got that new house, suddenly that just becomes the new normal. And we return to the baseline, our baseline happiness. So basically, she plots it out. If you are a 5 on the happiness scale, and then you get that thing you've been working for, you might go up to an 8, but then within a couple of weeks, you will be back at a 5, no matter how life-changing it was. And it goes so far that you would think a real life-changing thing would be winning the lottery. So they actually did a big study on lottery winners, and they followed these people for a year after they won some life-changing amount of money, and they compared them to a control group who just lived regular lives, and compared their happiness then and a year later. And what they found is after winning, the lottery a year later, they were no happier than the control group. So they returned to their baseline. And what the sadder finding was actually that they reported less pleasure from ordinary activities than before they had won. So because they had experienced this extraordinary, like probably what people dream of, suddenly the sort of normal things of life just didn't quite glisten as much as they did before. So the sad part about this treadmill is that it doesn't just leave us where we started, but it can actually leave us slightly worse off than where we were before. But her goal with this course is to see, we know that people return to their baseline happiness level, but can we improve our baseline? So back to the treadmill. The thing that she also found is why it just makes it this treadmill that just keeps on going and we don't move is that for some reason, as humans, we constantly make these forecasts or these predictions about what will make us happier. So we think about the promotion and we say, oh, yes, that will make me happy. And our brain does these things instantly without us really, truly thinking about it. And even if we have decades and decades of evidence for ourselves, our own personal studies about what made us happy and what didn't make us happier, the last house didn't make us much happier after a year. The car we worked for made us happy, but then it became normal again. For some reason, our brain will keep telling us, no, this one will be different. So we just continue to run thinking, no, the next one will be different. The next one will be different. And that's why it's truly just a treadmill. So basically the treadmill has two parts. On one side, we hit what we wanted to and we adapt. Whatever the raise, whatever it was becomes our new normal. So that lift fades. And then on the other end, we keep on mispredicting. We keep believing the next thing will be the exception, but it really is. So we live this life of always pursuing something, but never truly arriving. And that's why even Santos's students said, and this, I think there's a quote from them that said, it's the most uncomfortable truth they have ever heard. And that's not because the research was new. So I'm sure when I ask you, what's something that would make you happier? You already knew at the back of your mind, oh, it's not the house, it's not the promotion, it's not those things. You knew that. But we know this, we know it won't make us happier, but we'll keep choosing it over and over again. And her students found that in their course. They'd say, we know that getting the best internship after their Yale studies wasn't going to make them happier, but they kept pushing for it. So that's why it's this uncomfortable truth, because it's like these two sides are pulling at each other. And what she found in her studies is that knowing isn't enough. So just because we know something won't make us happier, it doesn't mean we'll actually do something about that. Because we have this forecasting system that is just continually misfiring and the knowledge just isn't correcting it. So what she found in her study is there are things that can make us get off this treadmill, because that's the only way out. We just have to completely jump off. But there are certain practices that we need to do. So that brings me back to Koa and how this talk sort of links to him, because he obviously hasn't done this research on the hedonic treadmill and being on the treadmill and pursuing the next thing. But it's obviously because as a baby, he doesn't need to. In his mind, every single moment is still wow. So this talk is specifically called wow, because for the past, I'd say almost 2 months, if not more, 4 months, his favorite word has been wow. And he says it probably 100 times a day. And it's not just wow, like he says it randomly. He says it at things that you could actually stop and think like, oh, that is wow. So it will be when we open the curtains in the morning, he'll every morning say, wow. Or if he sees a light, and he's always obviously looking around and seeing the things that we don't stop to notice. And because for him, this is all new, it's all exciting. He's not living on that treadmill. He's living in the moment, and he's noticing those things that are the wow moments, the things that make him happy, and he's verbalizing that. And my mom wrote a nice gospel bat the other day, and I thought it's sort of actually in a way summarizes what I want to say up front. And she put this verse from Psalms, and she said, this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. And she was also speaking about Koa and the way he always says, wow. And what I thought, I've quoted this from her gospel bat. She says, this verse is actually an invitation for us to notice. So to notice and pause and receive the day that God has given us as a gift rather than just rush past it. And then she says, which we'll go into, perhaps joy is not something that we chase, but something we choose to see. So for Koa, it's just, he's a baby. It's everything's new, everything's exciting, and he's verbalizing that. But for us, when we stop and reframe our mind to say today is actually a gift, and we can rush past it, or we can stop and see those small things, see the things God has given us, and actually choose to see things with joy and choose joy over rushing through it. So then that brings us to this question, and it's, what would it look like to live the rest of our lives with this quality of attention? And what the research has shown is there's practices that we can actually do to help us get back to that wow that Koa sees. And these practices are all backed in research, and they're the ones that they go through in the course. There's a few, but I just picked 4. So we'll be looking at savoring, gratitude, strengths in service, and relationship, and how these all link to happiness. So the first one is savoring. So this is not just experiencing a positive moment, but it's the deliberate act of actually focusing on it and holding it and letting it register in your mind. So when I think of savoring, I often will think of like sitting back, watching the sunset with a glass of wine. But although that's an amazing moment, because I've had so many of them, sometimes they just blur into each other. And I couldn't pick out like, oh, that was a really good one, unless something stood out. Like maybe it was an incredible sunset, and that's something that will make you register it. And some practices that we can do to help us savor moments are listed there. So one is sensory attention. So registering your senses. So what am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I tasting right now? So again, it's a practice that you have to think about, but it helps that moment sink in more. The other one is temporal awareness. So knowing a moment will not last. Again, with Koa, that's been something that's been on my mind a lot, because I see how quickly he grows. And that's definitely helped me savor moments more, because I know next month it will be completely different. But yeah, it's something we should practice no matter what stage of life we are in. Then another big one is actually sharing the moment with another person. So the research shows the moment shared is much greater, or has more effect on our happiness than a moment by ourselves. And then another thing you can do is mark it deliberately in your memory. So actually say, I want to remember this. So those are just things that help. And they've also shown that it's not something that you have to sit there for 30 minutes and say, I'm really concentrating. It doesn't have to be a deep meditation. It can be as short as 12 seconds. So 12 seconds of sustained attention to a positive moment can be enough for it to begin to start to consolidate into your memory. Obviously, I think they say if you can go to about 60 seconds, it's better. But if all you can do is 12 seconds, or you've going through something, you say, this is something that I want to remember, then just spend those 12 seconds looking around, taking it into your mind and sort of trying to commit it to your memory. But of course, what is interesting with all the research is the things that they're saying, I could probably find 20 verses for each of our practices that already, we know this from the Bible, and it's obviously because God made us, but just some verses for savoring. An obvious one, but I think a powerful one is in Psalms, where it's be still and know that I am God. So we know that it's not just thinking, know that I'm God, but that be still and know I'm God is a full seizing and letting go and surrendering. So it's fully getting off that treadmill and just focusing, being still in that moment and focusing on God. So that's one way to take savoring to the next level. And then the next one, they talk about the research, savoring is about activating the senses. We have taste and see that the Lord is good. So know God's goodness should actively be heightening our senses. It should be something that's actually happening. And again, if it's happening, if it's a practice, then that helps us savor it. It helps us build our relationship with God and find joy. And then another one is how Jesus often refers to like physical things. So an example is consider the lilies of the field. So it's not just a metaphor on consider the lilies, and then he goes on to how why do you worry? If God cares for these, how much more does he care for you? But it's actually also a practice. Like when you go out in nature, look at the flowers, look at the mountains, look at the birds, look at what God's created, and use that to savor the moment. And again, but bring it to that next level, that spiritual lens on what does that mean for me? What is God telling me through his creation? So that's savoring. Then the next one we are going to look at is gratitude. And again, I mean, you could probably straight away think of so many verses from the Bible, but one that also sort of encapsulates it in Thessalonians is give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you. And again, it's not give thanks for all circumstances, it's in all circumstances. So research shows that when you have gratitude, even in the middle of difficult things, it actually has more of a positive impact than a negative impact, which again seems obvious, but it's also something that we just have to practice. And of course, Paul actually wrote this from prison as well. And the research on gratitude is, so they did some research on journaling, so writing like gratitude journals. And they found that just writing a gratitude journal produced some of the most measurable improvements in well-being from a single practice, but not just well-being, sleep quality, physical health, and this happened quickly. So within weeks, they were starting to see improvements, and the effects were also seen much later on. So just if you're looking for a single practice, writing gratitude journaling, that will already start to help you. And they found two things. So specific beats general. So I'm grateful Dean made me a delicious flat white without me asking, beats saying I'm grateful for my family. So really thinking about the details of what someone or what you're thankful for brings it to that next level that truly makes it stick. And what they found even more than that is if you could actually express the gratitude to a person, actually say it out loud, that has some of the strongest effects. So it's the largest single intervention in well-being literature, actually, if you can do that. So some examples they gave is write a letter to someone about what you're thankful for, and then actually go to their door and read it to them. And like the effects were just incredible when they were measuring this out. So again, it's a practice. It's not something we're just going to do naturally, but it's something that stems from the Bible. It stems because God made us, God knows us, and the research is only now catching up. So that then brings us to practice 3, which is strength in service. So in the course, they go through, you can do a test, and basically research done by some people, and you do a test to find your signature strengths. And most people have 5 signature strengths. So these could be things like curiosity, kindness, perseverance. There is a link if you want to do it for yourself. Just search signature strengths test. And what they found is if you use your signature strengths throughout the week or throughout your days, this also has a very positive effect on your happiness. But again, there are some finer details. So the first is that novelty matters. So it's not just using your strength in, say, I'm good at analyzing stuff, and in my job, I do the same thing every day, analyzing some data, whatever it is. That's not going to bring me happiness. It's about taking that skill and using it in a different way and changing that up, thinking of new avenues of how this skill can be expressed. And the second one, which again is even more important, and already brings you to that spiritual level without me having to do much effort, but it's the direction matters. So strength used for yourself just fade. So they're just like the treadmill, you'll have a lift maybe, and then you'll be back to where you were running in the same place. But strengths that are used for something greater than yourself, so for someone else or anything greater than you, those produced real meaning, and those didn't fade in the same way. So yeah, again, it's like, it's so easy then to just look back at the Bible and see all these things already there, written 2,000 years ago in the New Testament. So in Peter, we have each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. So we know we've been given these gifts, and in spiritual language, gifts are not meant to be kept for yourself. They're meant to be spent on other people. And that's quite accurately seen in the parable of the talents. So we know the story about those who bury their talents, and then those who put them in and created abundance from what they were given. And Jesus says to those who created the most abundance, said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness." So I just think that's such an incredible thing if you think about it in your own life, where sharing your talents or sharing your strengths with others actually allows you to share in God and Jesus's own happiness. So yeah, I think that's a great lens to look at it through. And then I also like this verse in Ephesians, which says, "We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." So the first part of that verse is we are made. So that's a gift in itself. We didn't create ourselves. God gave us the gift of life, but he gave us this gift for a reason. We were made for a purpose. So that's why this research keeps linking back to the things in the Bible, because we have a purpose. And even more than that, God has already prepared what we should be doing. The works have been prepared in advance. So by sort of surfacing these things, by doing these things that research are saying make us happier, it's almost closing that loop, because of course it's what God prepared for us. And I don't think you can miss out that we were created in Christ Jesus to do the good work. So because Jesus died for us, again, we have this life. It's a gift. And because he did that, we have the ability to continue doing those good works, which God has prepared in advance for us to do. So that then brings me to the fourth practice, which is relationships. So again, there's another study, and you'll see they spend years doing these studies, which they could just do much quicker if they looked into the Bible, but it's great to have the research to back everything. But this study's been going for 85 years, and it's the longest running study of, they say, human flourishing ever conducted. So how do humans flourish? What causes it? And they're continuing it still. And what they found in the past 85 years is the strongest single predictor of happiness, health, and longevity across a lifespan is the warmth and quality of close relationships. So out of all the different practices, the thing they found has the most impact is still relationships. And again, you can already see relationships woven through the other practices. Strengths given to yourself don't do much, but for others, they do something. A moment shared with someone else is greater than a moment by yourself. So it's already all baked in. Of course, gratitude is forcing you to have some sort of relationship with someone, and being thankful for someone else. So you can see why this would be the biggest predictor of happiness. And again, go back to Genesis, and we can see why from the beginning God said it is not good for man to be alone. So God, right in the beginning, created us to have a relationship with other people, and of course, have a relationship with him too. So again, this goes deeper than what the studies would show, because they would say you need a relationship. Some of them do even say some sort of community church. Those are all great, but I like this quote from, I think it's St. Augustine, and he says, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." So I think the reason relationships are so key is because we were made to seek God. We were made to have a relationship with him, and without that, then we'll always have this sort of something that just doesn't quite feel right. And just some verses in Psalms that I like, which sort of show how our soul almost aches for this relationship with God. And the first is in Psalms 16. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. So very often I found that joy was linked to God's presence. And I know we like to make the differentiation between joy and happiness, with happiness circumstantial and joy more being spiritual from God. And often when joy was used in the Bible, it's linked to God and his presence. Then in Psalms, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. So having this sort of like, even looking at ourselves, do we have this ache for God? And I think if you reflect, you might think that ache may be for something else, but often it's what was created in us from the beginning, and only God can fill that. And that's why relationships are so key. But that sort of brings me back to the beginning again, because we know all these things as well. Like I said, this isn't new. The research isn't new. We read the Bible. We've seen what God tells us to do. But once again, we know it works, but we still don't always live this way. And that's because it's how our brains are almost wired. So this treadmill is sticky and it's like pulling us back. And our mind will keep on mispredicting, saying, no, but look at that shiny thing, look at that. And our phones have made it 10,000 times worse. It's so easy to get those sort of quick dopamine hits now, bringing you back to the treadmill, comparing, let me do a bit of work here, always sort of not living in the moment, but going towards the next thing. And yeah, it's annoying, but it's just how we just keep on seeming to pull ourselves back onto that treadmill. And I started off by saying the research said knowing isn't enough, so we should practice. And while practicing is very important, I think most of us here can be testament to that. Practicing by itself also isn't enough. And practices can very quickly become their own sort of spiritual treadmill, but still a treadmill. And again, that's because joy is actually a person and not a practice. And of course, everything always eventually points to Jesus in some way. But I liked this verse in John, and I thought it summarizes a lot of the key things we've been looking at so far. So just reading, let me just read it first. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. So again, that's bringing in the relationship. It's all about love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. So it's not just relational, though. There's still something that is linked to it. There's commands. Keeping God's commands should flow through that. The practices, the things God tells us to do that he knows will make us happier in the end. But again, it's those commands linked to the relationship, linked to love. And then what does that lead to? Then he says, I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. So almost I see it as like the cycle where we have this relationship, which then helps us keep God's commands or show his spirit. But then again, also doing those practices helps us improve our relationship with God and Jesus too. But within all of that is where we suddenly find the joy as well. And not just our joy, but having Jesus' joy inside us, which I think is incredible to think about. So the way I've sort of seeing it at the moment is the practices are doors and not necessarily destinations. So if we look at those with a slightly different lens, we have savoring. So we can see savoring is how we receive the gift of what God has already given, going out into creation, looking at the people around you, just savoring the moments that God has already given to us in our lives and knowing that they are gifts from him. Then gratitude is how we recognize what Christ has already done. So because Christ has died for us, because we have life in him, because he did it first, how do we now show how grateful we are to others as well? Then service is how we participate in the renewal he is bringing. So God says he wants to fill the earth with his glory. And how do we do that? We can do that by service, by sharing his fruits of the Spirit with others, by sharing our strengths with others. And then relationships are how we experience the love that comes from God himself. So I think one, having that vertical relationship, but then also bringing that into your horizontal relationships with those around you. So, like I said in the beginning, what the aim of this course actually is so in the beginning, people measure their baseline happiness. And then the hope is once you've done the course, you've done all the practices, your baseline happiness will improve. So now when something happens, you go up and you return back to baseline happiness, your happiness level is higher. So maybe you started at a 5 and you finished the course and you're on an 8. And people did. Their baseline levels do improve with the practices. But what's amazing for us is that in Jesus, our baseline has been completely reset. So that's when the research starts to go a little bit different from what the Bible says, because now we just have this completely new baseline that we can actually have access to. And that's why we get stories like Paul rejoicing in the prison, and in James having pure joy from trials, and obviously Jesus is the ultimate example, enduring the cross with joy. So we have access to that same joy. So we don't have to have this baseline that we work towards through doing the practices, although that could get us higher. It's knowing that just having access to Jesus can take it to a whole nother level. But again, I don't want to leave it there, because again, then as soon as something is abstract, then often we say, well, why are we messing up? We know, and we know it's because we aren't perfect. So even though we have access to this baseline, we have access to Jesus's joy in us, it's not always the same as living from it. And sometimes, like we spoke about in the beginning, sometimes it's a choice. Sometimes you have to look at every day and say, I choose to see this day with joy. I choose to see the wow in this day. So it's about constantly reminding ourselves, just jump off the treadmill and working on it. And these practices, because they are also linked to what the Bible said, are things that can actually help us. So for this week, our hoping everyone can pick all the practices or pick a practice and intentionally try and do it throughout the week. I'd hope Josh had made a cool little app, and maybe he'll send it out, but that helps you, nudges you to do the things that you write notes about in Bible classes and in church. So maybe he'll send that if he finishes in time. But basically, yeah, pick one. So if it's savor, say 3 times a day at this time, or in these moments, I will spend that time savoring the moment, or choose someone to give thanks to, one person, however, but make it detailed, really think about it, choose, or maybe find out what your top strengths are, and then see how you can use those to serve others or tend a relationship. Could be one with another person, or it could be with God and Jesus. But yeah, hopefully pick one and try and put it into practice this week. So depending on how deeply you were thinking in the beginning, the thing you wrote on the card, even if it was in a broad form relationship, or maybe you did say work or job, but knowing the crowd, they probably didn't. Other than if Jesus coming back, which will definitely make you happier. If it's anything physical, it probably will make you happier. But the thing is, it will only make you happy briefly, and then your brain will adapt and you'll look for the next thing, and you just continue on that treadmill. Or again, you can just choose to step off. And it's about knowing that Jesus has told us the kingdom is here. So this moment now, this is a moment you can choose joy, and joy is here. Joy is now. And I think it's because God has told us, Jesus has told us in Revelations, behold, I am making all things new. This moment can be new. The kingdom is already here. The joy is already here. And when we see things through that lens of everything being new, we can actually, once again, have that view that Koa has, that mindset of a child, where every moment can once again be wow. So that brings me to the end of my part. Ingrid is going to, like I said, it is all about putting things into practice. So she's going to share how she has been putting things savoring into practice recently.
Sarah, that was very well done. I think
You're
you've
not
said it
muted,
all.
but we can't hear you.
No, my audio's on.
Can hear you. We can
Can
hear her.
you? Yeah. Sarah, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So, but she said it all. I don't have anything to say. Just first of all, I'll start by saying I've started the course of that. When Snoodles told me about the course, I've started it, and obviously it's very interesting, and there's a lot to learn there. Living in the moment, as Koa has taught us, is not easy, and it's not a strength of mine. I tend to worry about tomorrow and what it's going to bring. Matthew 6:34, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring about itself. For tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So yes, I'm struggling. In this time that I've had with Koa, he has really taught us to live in the moment. Everything is just wow. And you experience joy and happiness at the same time. But we don't always do it. So I thought, let's quickly just remind you of a little story. And teachers always like stories. And it's of a little old lady who was complaining that her house was too small. So she went to someone to get some advice, and they said to her, no, 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 you actually need to get yourself a dog. And the next thing, she got a dog. Okay, a few more days. No, 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 the house is still too small. No, you must get yourself a cat. So she went and got herself a cat. And it goes on, and she gets a cow and a donkey. It's one of the children's stories. And eventually she said, that's just not working. This house is too small for me. And she goes back to this chap that's helping her. And he says, well, maybe get rid of the donkey. Then maybe get rid of the cow. Until eventually she's back where she started. And she realizes she was happy to start off with. She didn't need all that extra stuff. She had it all. I also think by not living in the moment can severely impact the lives of those around us. And from a teacher's point of view, I worked very closely with a social worker at school. Social worker would come and speak to children from the ages of 6 to 12. Children would have either death in the family or just concerns, or their mother doesn't give them enough time. And so often, when I was thinking about this talk, the children would say to the social worker, my mom doesn't care about me. And she'll say, but how can you say that? Have you spoken to your mom? And she'll say, my mom doesn't have time for me. No, 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 but where's your mom? Does she work? Or is she all the time? No, my mom is there, but she's always on her phone. She doesn't have time for me. And I think sometimes it's there. We're scrolling on our phones, and I now see it from the children's side that they think the parents don't care for them anymore, simply because they're not in the moment. They're not in the moment where the children need them. So I think we must be aware of that. Sometimes they will say to the child, yes, but not now, not now. I'm busy at the moment. So eventually the child gets to the point where they have got no one to speak to. So I think it's quite aware as us as adults with youngsters growing up, are we there for people? When you're living in the moment, are you there for them? In my job as a teacher for 40-something years, it definitely did teach me to live in the moment, in so much that when you're teaching 30 children, if you're not in the moment, you're going to have a bad day. You've got 30 individual, unique children, each wanting you. And I'm talking now specifically from your younger children. Each has a unique need. If you haven't planned your day correctly, your day is going to go crazy. They are going to make hell in that classroom. They will start throwing things because the naughty one, you haven't noticed him, or this one will push the other one just because he wants to be noticed. So you have to be present. You have to be present. You can't start worrying about your shopping list or who you're going to fetch after school. So teaching definitely taught me to be present in the moment. And of course, being present in the moment gives you so much reward. For example, those little children that look at you, this old granny, and they say, oh, you look so beautiful, I love that's in your hair. And that they actually got sunglasses on almost because they're not even talking the truth. But that kind of response also helps to build you up. So yes, I love teaching little children. They just make you feel so good. Very important part, and Sarah did mention it, and it's very important to me in my teaching, and when I was a principal as well, is relationships. It's very, very important to have relationships, and your relationships that you have, we as Christians, people must know that you're a Christian. They must know from looking at your countenance, from looking at you, what has she got that's different? You know, what has she got that I want that? I want that. Not that you walk around and you say, I'm a Christian, so this is what I'm doing. But by looking at your behavior and how you interact with people, how you listen to them and have time for them, that's, I feel is very, very important. And it's a priority in my life. Then, so just also want to share with you, in teaching, you're always looking for ways to try and help the children about living their best life, taking the best out of life. Children often think, well, I'm not going to live for today because I'm going to a movie on Saturday, or my dad's buying me this on Sunday. So they're not living in the now. How do we teach children to live in the now? So there's a story that was written by Lewis Smeads, and he tells of a book that's filled with lots of empty boxes. And each box has got a number in it. And what I'm referring to here is actually a diary with an empty box. Okay, it's got 4 sides. And I have done this in an assembly where I said to the children, what is the date today? Okay, it's the 29th of April, 2026. It's enclosed with 4 sides. What are you going to do with that box today? Right, you've got brushing your teeth, you're coming to school, you're traveling to work, you may go somewhere else afterwards. What are you packing into that day? Because, and of course you make it quite dramatic for them, you will never, ever, ever, ever have this day again in your whole life. That 29th of April is never going to be there again. Then I say to them, they've got all the things there, but to make it easier, you've got your friend to be with you, and the friend is Jesus. And when you've got Jesus with you, again, that's a relationship, your day is going to be so much better. And I think that's very important to teach children. It's you teaching them to be living in the moment. I mean, whatever you're doing, if you've got Jesus with you, you're going to have a better day. I mean, I was cooking crumpets the other day, and I had to do 75 of them. It took a hang of a long time. And what did I do while I was making the crumpets? I was praying for a different person as I made each pancake. Just, it may have made a difference to that person, but it kept me busy and it kept me talking to Jesus. So that was good for me. So you need to be able to make a difference. Be mindful of the fact that you can make a difference. So let's go back to Koa. Koa comes here in the morning. You have to be present when he's here. He's only a year old. He moves like lightning. He climbs on things. If you're not in the moment, he's going to pull something down on himself, or he's going to end up climbing into the washing machine, or you have to be in the moment. He also, because his face lights up so easily, you have to watch him, and you can see all these wonderful things that he's seeing. And sometimes they say, the Bible says, we must be like a child, right? Maybe if we experience our world as he is now, everything would be so much better as well. So for Michael and I, those wow moments are very special. And I think I often shout wow louder than Koa with some of the things that he's doing. Michael will look at me and say, what on earth is that about? And it's because I've said a louder wow than Koa. But as Sarah said, it's a choice. It's a choice whether you're going to be mindful each day of every moment that you spend every day. Who are you with? You have a choice to live in the now, but you can do it. And I'm working on it. So now we can